It always starts the same way. A knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just persistent. You weren't expecting anyone. It's late. Maybe you ignore it. Maybe you check the peephole, only to see two children standing outside. They're pale, dressed strangely, almost out of time. Their heads are tilted slightly downward, as if waiting for something. Then one of them speaks. Then you notice their eyes, completely black. No whites, no pupils, just empty, endless voids. And suddenly an overwhelming sense of dread washes over you. Your instincts scream at you to shut the door, but they won't go away. Stories of pale, lifeless children with jet black eyes knocking on doors may sound like something from ancient folklore. Yet, the first major recorded case of the black-eyed children didn't appear until the 1990s. Unlike classic ghost stories or urban legends passed down for generations, this phenomenon seemed to appear out of nowhere, and its earliest reports were chillingly specific. The first widely known encounter came from a respected journalist in Texas. His experience, unsettling and unexplainable, would set off a wave of similar reports from around the world. It was a late evening in 1996, in the quiet town of Abilene, Texas. Brian Bethel, a well-known journalist, sat in his car outside a movie theater, parked under the dim glow of a streetlight. He was writing a check, lost in thought, when he heard a sharp knock on the window. He looked up. Standing outside were two young boys, both around 9 to 12 years old, dressed in simple hooded sweatshirts. They stood just outside the reach of the light, their faces partially obscured by the darkness. One of them spoke. "Mister, we need a ride. We want to see a movie, but we left our money at home. Can you take us to get it?" The way the boy spoke sent a chill through Bethel's spine. The tone was flat, unnatural, too confident for a child. Something about them felt off. There was no hesitation in their voices, no trace of emotion, just a quiet insistence that he let them in. A sudden, unexplainable dread settled in his chest. The feeling was so intense that his hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel. Then he saw their eyes. They were completely black. No whites, no irises, no pupils. Just an abyss of darkness, hollow and endless. The fear that gripped him was like nothing he had ever felt before. His instincts screamed at him to lock the doors and leave immediately, but the boys didn't move. One of them stepped closer. "We can't come in unless you invite us." A new wave of terror hit Bethel like a tidal wave. Somehow, he knew that if he let them in, something terrible would happen. He had no logical reason to believe this, just a deep, primal certainty that these were not children. As his body fought against an invisible force urging him to comply, he managed to snap himself out of the trance. His hand shot to the gear shift. Without another word, he threw the car into reverse and sped out of the parking lot. When he glanced in the rearview mirror, the boys were gone. He barely made it home, his pulse still racing. The experience had shaken him so badly that he sat in silence for hours, trying to convince himself that it had been his imagination. But no matter how much he rationalized, he knew one thing for certain. Those weren't children, and they wanted something from him. After Brian Bethel shared his experience on an online message board, something strange happened. Other people came forward, claiming to have had the exact same encounter. They too had been approached by strange, pale children with completely black eyes, asking for permission to enter homes, cars, or buildings. The details were eerily similar. The children always arrived at night. Their voices were too mature, too controlled. They never begged, never pleaded, just insisted. And those who encountered them reported feeling an overwhelming, unnatural fear. The reports didn't just come from the United States. Within months, similar encounters were being reported in England, Canada, and even Australia. It was as if something had been unleashed. Some believed it was a shared hallucination, a case of mass hysteria fueled by the internet. But others weren't so sure. How could so many people describe the same terrifying experience without ever having heard of Brian Bethel's story before? Perhaps the strangest part of the black-eyed children mystery is that there are no significant records of them before the 1990s. If these beings had always existed, why weren't there stories about them in older folklore, medieval legends, or ancient mythologies? Some believe that they are a modern manifestation of an old supernatural force, something that has always been here but only recently began revealing itself in this form. Others suggest that the rise of the internet simply allowed these encounters to be shared more widely, making it seem like a new phenomenon, when in reality, it had been happening for much longer. But the most chilling theory is the simplest. Perhaps the reason there were no reports of them before the 1990s is because they weren't here before. Something changed. Something arrived. And whatever these black-eyed children are, they're only getting started. The stories of black-eyed children follow a chillingly consistent pattern. The encounters may take place in different locations, at different times, and with different witnesses, but their behavior remains eerily the same. They appear suddenly and unexpectedly, often at night. They knock on doors, tap on car windows, or stand by deserted roads, always with the same request: let us in. And with that request comes something far more terrifying, a deep, overwhelming sense of dread that washes over the person they are speaking to. A feeling that something is terribly, fundamentally wrong. Those who encounter them often describe it as the most intense fear they have ever experienced. Their thoughts become clouded. Their instincts scream at them to run, to shut the door, to drive away, anything to escape. Yet at the same time, they feel an odd pressure to comply. A strange, hypnotic pull that makes them want to say yes. And that is what makes these entities so terrifying, because they cannot enter unless you allow them to. One of the most unnerving aspects of black-eyed children encounters is that they always ask for permission to enter. No matter where they appear, outside homes, in parking lots, or even on remote highways, they never force their way in. Instead, they simply wait. They do not get angry when refused. They do not beg. They do not react at all. They just keep asking, "We can't come in unless you let us." Their voices remain flat, emotionless, almost mechanical. They do not smile. They do not frown. They do not move unless it is to step closer. And the longer you wait, the more insistent they become. Some people have reported that the children's voices begin to shift, becoming distorted, as if multiple voices are speaking at once. Others claim that their sense of time becomes distorted, that the encounter feels stretched out, as if reality itself is shifting. Then, as suddenly as they arrived, they disappear. If they are refused, they do not try to force their way inside. They do not lash out. They simply vanish. And that, some argue, is what makes them so terrifying. Because if they were simply ghosts or demons or aliens, why would they need permission at all? What are they truly waiting for? Almost every encounter with black-eyed children comes with an overwhelming sense of primal terror. Those who have seen them describe it as more than just fear. It is paralyzing, suffocating. One witness, a truck driver who encountered a black-eyed child on an empty highway, described the experience in haunting detail. "I've been in life or death situations before. I've been face to face with dangerous people. I know what fear feels like. But this was something else. This was like my body was screaming at me to run. My hands were shaking. My skin felt cold. My thoughts felt tangled. Like something was trying to keep me from thinking clearly. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't let that thing get any closer." Some theorists believe that this deep-rooted terror is not natural. It is imposed by the children themselves. Perhaps they are able to manipulate human emotions, to cloud judgment and weaken resistance. Perhaps the fear is not a warning from within, but a weapon being used against us. Most stories of black-eyed children end before anything truly terrible happens. The witnesses listen to their instincts, slam the door, drive away, refuse to engage. But there are a few stories, whispers, rumors, unsettling accounts buried in online forums that suggest some people have let them in, and those stories never end well. One case involved an elderly couple in rural Vermont. On a cold winter night, they heard a soft knock at the door. When they opened it, they saw two small children standing in the snow. They were pale, dressed strangely, and claimed they had gotten lost in a snowstorm. The couple, feeling pity for them, let them inside. As the children stepped over the threshold, the couple suddenly felt an intense wave of nausea and dizziness. The husband's nose began to bleed. The wife collapsed onto the couch, feeling as if all the energy had been drained from her body. The children sat perfectly still. They did not speak. They did not move. Then, after several minutes, they stood up at the exact same time. Our parents are here. The couple turned to look outside. A black car was parked in the driveway. A tall, faceless man in a suit stood beside it. The children walked out the door and got inside. The car drove away. In the weeks that followed, the elderly couple became gravely ill. The wife developed mysterious migraines and blackouts. The husband was diagnosed with rapidly progressing cancer. By the end of the year, they were both dead. Their family members believed that whatever those children were, letting them in sealed their fate. There are other stories like this. Stories of people who gave in, let the children inside and suffered for it. Yet no one knows what would happen if someone allowed one of them to stay permanently. Because no one who has done so has ever been heard from again. The consistency of these encounters raises one final, chilling question. Are the black-eyed children merely testing the waters? Do they appear at doors, knock on windows, and ask for entry because they are slowly conditioning us? If so, what happens when enough people say yes? The chilling behavior of black-eyed children, their unnatural presence, their hypnotic influence, their insistence on being invited in, has led many to believe they are not of this world. If they are not flesh and blood beings, then what are they? Many researchers, paranormal investigators, and demonologists have tried to make sense of these terrifying encounters. Some believe they are ghosts trapped between realms, seeking passage into the world of the living. Others suspect they are demons, entities that require permission to enter a home before they can wreak havoc on a person's soul. Then there are those who believe they are something even darker, beings from another plane of existence, testing the limits of human free will. One thing is certain, they are not normal children, and whatever they are, they want something from us. Some researchers propose that black-eyed children could be the spirits of lost souls, perhaps victims of tragic deaths or abandoned children whose spirits never found peace. There are some eerie patterns that support this idea. Many of the reported encounters happen near cemeteries, old battlefields, or locations tied to past trauma. Some witnesses have claimed that after encountering them, their homes became plagued by poltergeist activity, unexplained knocks, moving objects, sudden drops in temperature. Could it be that these entities are spirits in search of energy? If so, why do they always follow the same rule? Why must they be invited in? In many cultures, ghosts are believed to have limited influence in the physical world, unless they are acknowledged. By opening the door, by granting them permission, could people be giving them access to something deeper, perhaps even their own life force? And if that is the case, what happens when they stay too long? Some religious scholars and demonologists believe the black-eyed children are not ghosts at all. Instead, they suspect these beings are demons, malevolent entities that disguise themselves as children to lure victims into letting their guard down. In many ancient texts and folklore traditions, demons are bound by rules of invitation. Unlike ghosts, who can haunt places freely, demons require consent before they can fully manifest in someone's life. This is why they cannot enter homes uninvited. Many of the most terrifying black-eyed children encounters follow classic demonic patterns, the unnatural fear that washes over victims. In almost every case, people report feeling an instinctual terror upon seeing them. This is often described as a warning from the subconscious, as if the body itself is rejecting their presence. The hypnotic pull. Witnesses describe feeling as though their thoughts become clouded, or that they feel a strange compulsion to obey. Some have even claimed they started to reach for the door handle without realizing it. Their effect on people who let them in. Reports of illness, psychological disturbances, or even death often follow encounters where the children are invited inside. In some cases, the victims report that their homes become filled with dark energy, leading to a rapid decline in their health. If these beings are demonic in nature, their mission may not simply be to frighten. They may be actively seeking access to human souls. Some of the most unsettling theories about black-eyed children suggest that they're neither ghosts nor demons, but something far older and more powerful. Some researchers propose that these beings may be interdimensional entities, beings that exist outside our understanding of time and space. There are accounts of people encountering them in places where reality itself seems to bend, isolated roads, deep forests, even inside their own dreams. Some who have experienced sleep paralysis have claimed to see black-eyed children standing at the foot of their bed, watching silently as they remain unable to move. One chilling theory suggests that these beings are part of a larger force, observing humanity and waiting for an unknown event to occur. Some believe that they are scouts, testing the limits of our world, searching for weaknesses. Whether they are spirits, demons, or something far stranger, the patterns of their behavior remain consistent. They always appear in pairs or small groups. They always ask for permission to enter. They always invoke an unnatural fear response, and they always disappear without a trace if refused. What makes them so terrifying is that no one truly knows what they are. There are no physical records, no photographs, no way to prove they exist. Yet countless people across the world have encountered them. While many believe that black-eyed children are spirits or demons, another theory suggests that they aren't supernatural at all. Instead, some researchers propose that they are extraterrestrial beings, or hybrids, sent to observe, study, or interact with humanity. Their appearance, their unnatural behavior, and their eerie ability to instill fear all resemble characteristics commonly found in alien abduction accounts. Some even suggest that their black eyes are a sign of their non-human origins. One of the most disturbing features of the black-eyed children is, of course, their eyes. Witnesses describe them as entirely black, lacking any white sclera or visible pupils. They are deep, empty voids, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. This characteristic is not unique to these children. Reports of alien encounters, specifically with the greys, often describe similar pitch-black, oversized eyes. The classic grey alien, as described by countless abductees, has large, pupilless black eyes that seem to stare straight through a person's soul. Some researchers believe there may be a connection between the two phenomena. Could black-eyed children be a hybrid species, part human, part extraterrestrial? Are they experiments created to blend in with us, but unable to hide their unnatural presence? Or are they something else entirely? Beyond their appearance, black-eyed children also share bizarre similarities with cases of alien abduction and visitation. Many people who claim to have encountered them describe feeling paralyzed with fear, much like abductees who report being unable to move during their encounters with non-human entities. Some witnesses also describe a feeling of disorientation, time distortion, or memory gaps after seeing these children, another common trait in alien abduction cases. One particularly eerie connection is the way the children seem to influence human thought. Witnesses often say that during their encounters they feel an unnatural compulsion to obey, almost as if their minds are being manipulated. Could this be an example of extraterrestrial telepathy? Some of the most unsettling reports involving black-eyed children include instances of missing time. In many alien abduction cases, witnesses report experiencing gaps in memory, where they suddenly wake up and realize that hours have passed without recollection. There are a handful of cases where people claim to have encountered black-eyed children, only to realize later that they had lost time. One witness, a woman in Oregon, described answering her door one evening to find two children with black eyes standing outside. She listened as they asked to come inside, but she suddenly felt dizzy, confused, unable to think clearly. The next thing she knew, she was standing in her living room, and 4 hours had passed. The children were gone. She had no memory of what had happened in between. Was this a glitch in her memory, or something far more disturbing? Some UFO researchers propose that black-eyed children are not fully extraterrestrial, but rather human-alien hybrids. According to some theories, alien species, particularly the greys, have been conducting genetic experiments on humans for decades, if not centuries. Reports of abductions involving reproductive experiments have led some to believe that these experiments are intended to create a new type of being. If the black-eyed children are part of this experiment, it could explain their strange appearance, their unnatural speech, and their inability to fully mimic human behavior. This could also explain their struggles to enter homes or vehicles without permission. Are they testing whether humans will willingly accept them into their lives? Could their purpose be to gradually integrate into our society, one invitation at a time? Every encounter with black-eyed children carries a disturbing psychological element. Those who see them don't just experience fear. They feel an overwhelming, unnatural terror, unlike anything they've ever encountered before. It is not the kind of fear that comes from danger or threats. It is deeper, more primal, as if their very presence triggers something buried in the human subconscious. What makes this phenomenon even stranger is that people often report feeling an odd compulsion to obey the children's requests, despite their overwhelming dread. Why do these beings provoke such an intense emotional reaction? Do they possess the ability to manipulate human thoughts, cloud judgment, or even control people's actions? And if so, what happens to those who give in to the influence? Most people know what fear feels like. A sudden sound in the dark, a near-miss car accident, a moment where survival instincts kick in. But encounters with black-eyed children trigger a fear that is different. Witnesses have described it as paralyzing, suffocating, consuming. It is not just a sense of dread. It is as if every fiber of their being is screaming at them to run. One man who encountered them at his home in Texas described it like this: "I have never been so afraid in my life. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't believe in ghosts. But when I looked at those kids, my whole body rejected them. It was like my instincts knew something my mind didn't. I could barely breathe. The only thing I knew was that I had to shut the door." Beyond the sheer terror they invoke, many witnesses report something even stranger: the sensation that their own thoughts are being manipulated. It is common for those who encounter black-eyed children to describe moments where they feel themselves beginning to obey, almost involuntarily. One woman who was approached by them while sitting in her car said, "I knew I needed to drive away, but for some reason my hand started moving toward the door handle. It wasn't my choice. It was like my body was reacting on its own." Others have described feeling mentally foggy, disoriented, or unable to think clearly during encounters. Some even claim that after seeing the children, they experienced lingering headaches, confusion, or gaps in memory. Could it be that these beings possess the ability to influence human minds, weakening our resistance, pushing us to let them in? If black-eyed children are capable of psychological manipulation, how do they do it? There are several theories, none of which provide comforting answers. Some believe they may use low-frequency sound waves or electromagnetic energy to disrupt the human brain. Scientific studies have shown that certain low-frequency vibrations known as infrasound can create sensations of unease, paranoia, and even hallucinations. Could these beings be using a form of sound or energy that alters perception, making people more vulnerable to suggestion? Others believe that their influence is psychic or telepathic. Some witnesses report hearing their voices inside their heads, even when the children's lips do not move. Could they be communicating on a level beyond human understanding, directly implanting suggestions into the mind? If so, this could explain why many people feel physically compelled to obey, despite their overwhelming fear. It could also explain why some people report blurry memories, lost time, and lingering confusion after encounters. Many ancient myths and legends describe beings with the ability to manipulate human perception. In Celtic folklore, there are stories of fey creatures that use a supernatural ability known as glamour, a power that allows them to alter how humans see, hear, or feel. A person under a glamour spell might believe they are looking at something harmless, only to later realize they were deceived. Could the black-eyed children be using something similar? Are they appearing as children because that is what they want us to see? If they truly revealed themselves, would they look completely different? What if the pale skin and small frames are just a mask? And what if those who have let them in never realized what they had truly invited inside? One of the most unsettling theories about black-eyed children is that they may not just be manipulating human emotions, they may be feeding off them. Throughout history, many supernatural entities, from demons to shadow beings, have been associated with draining energy from the living. The idea that fear itself is a form of sustenance has been explored in many spiritual traditions. Some believe that certain entities thrive on human terror, growing stronger when we are afraid. Could black-eyed children be harvesting fear, appearing just long enough to cause intense distress before disappearing? Or are they preparing for something much worse? If they are feeding, then what happens when they grow hungry enough to take more? The stories of those who say yes are far less common. They are harder to verify, often told second-hand. Some appear as cryptic warnings, as if the victims themselves never had a chance to explain, and in many cases, the people who invite them in are never heard from again. One of the most infamous cases of someone letting black-eyed children inside comes from a rural town in Vermont. It is said that an elderly couple was at home one evening when they heard a soft knock at the door. When the husband opened it, he found two small children standing in the snow. They looked no older than 9 or 10 years old, dressed in thin, outdated clothing that seemed inappropriate for the freezing weather. Their heads were bowed slightly and their voices were quiet when they spoke. "We are lost. Can we come in and use your phone?" The couple felt a pang of sympathy. They lived in an isolated area, and it wasn't uncommon for people to get lost in winter storms. Despite an unnatural hesitation creeping into the husband's chest, he stepped aside and allowed them inside. The children walked in without another word. The wife led them to the living room, offering them blankets and tea. As she handed them their cups, she noticed something wasn't right. The children sat completely motionless. They didn't thank her, didn't drink, didn't shiver from the cold. They just sat, staring at the floor. Then the wife saw their eyes, completely black. A wave of dizziness hit her so suddenly that she nearly collapsed. The husband clutched his head, feeling an immediate searing headache. The air in the room seemed to thicken, the warmth from the fireplace fading into an unnatural chill. Then, as if sensing that their presence had been exposed, the children spoke at the same time. "Our parents are here." The wife turned to the window and saw a black car idling in the driveway. Standing beside it was a tall, featureless figure, dressed in a black suit. The children stood up, walked to the front door, and without another word, stepped outside into the night. The husband, barely able to stand from the pain in his skull, watched as they climbed into the car. The vehicle pulled away without headlights, disappearing down the snow-covered road. From that night forward, nothing was ever the same for the couple. The husband was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer only weeks later. The wife began suffering from constant blackouts, nightmares, and unexplained bleeding from her nose and ears. Within 6 months, both were dead. Their family, convinced that the encounter had something to do with their sudden illness, tried to trace the origin of the children or the strange car, but no records existed. It was as if they had never been there at all. Another case, this time from Portland, Oregon, tells of a man who was driving home late at night when he spotted two children walking along the highway. Thinking it was unsafe for them to be out alone at that hour, he pulled over and offered them a ride. They hesitated at first, staring at him through the window. Then in unison, they asked, "Can we come inside?" He said yes. As they climbed into the back seat, an overwhelming wave of nausea hit him. His head throbbed, his vision blurred, and for a moment it felt like he was losing time. The next thing he knew, he was sitting in his car alone. The children were gone. He had no memory of the past 3 hours. His phone, which had been fully charged earlier, was now completely dead. And when he finally made it home, he realized something even stranger. His shoes were covered in dirt and leaves from a forested area miles away from the highway. He had no memory of ever leaving the road. Days later, he began to feel ill. His skin grew pale, his energy drained, and he developed an unexplained rash across his arms and chest. Doctors could not identify the cause. Weeks passed and his condition worsened. Then without warning, he disappeared. His friends and family reported him missing when he failed to return their calls. His apartment was found abandoned, his car still parked outside. His bank account was never touched again. Authorities searched for him for months. He was never seen again. Some believe he was taken. Others believe he never really came back from wherever the children took him. The stories of those who let the black-eyed children in always end in tragedy, but what remains unclear is why they need permission in the first place. If they are spirits, demons, or extraterrestrials, why must they follow this one strange rule? Some believe that it is a supernatural contract. In many cultures, it is believed that malevolent entities cannot enter a home unless they are invited. By extending an invitation, the victim is unknowingly granting them power. Others think it is a form of psychological conditioning. The children appear harmless, small, vulnerable, polite. They test human willingness to override fear and accept them. Perhaps they are waiting for the moment when enough people say yes, when enough doors open, when enough people willingly allow them into the world. And if that happens, what comes next? For those who let them in and survive, life is never the same. They suffer from chronic illness, disturbing visions, and a strange, lingering sense that something is always watching. But some people simply vanish without a trace. There are many theories about why black-eyed children continue to manifest. Some believe that they are drawn to areas of high emotional energy or turmoil, which could explain why sightings often spike after major disasters, wars, or periods of mass anxiety. Others suspect that they are deliberately increasing their presence, searching for something or someone who will finally let them in. One of the most disturbing theories suggests that these encounters are not random. Instead, they may be targeted. There are reports from people who have claimed to see the children multiple times throughout their lives. Sometimes the encounters begin in childhood, only to resurface years later. One woman from Chicago described how she first encountered the black-eyed children when she was 8 years old. She and her friends had been playing near an abandoned house when a small, silent child appeared from the shadows. The child never spoke, only stared. The children ran in terror, but for years afterward, the woman experienced strange dreams, an unshakable sense of being watched. Then, decades later, when she was in her 30s, she heard a knock on her apartment door late at night. She opened it just a crack, and standing outside was the same black-eyed child she had seen as a girl, perfectly still, waiting. She slammed the door shut, feeling the same indescribable dread she had felt all those years ago. Was it a coincidence? Or do these entities follow people, waiting for a moment when they are weak enough to say yes? While most cases of black-eyed children are dismissed as urban legends or overactive imaginations, there are whispers that law enforcement has taken some of these reports seriously. In several of these cases, when police arrived to investigate, the children had already disappeared without a trace. Some officers have even reported feeling uneasy, nauseous, or momentarily disoriented while standing near the locations where the children were last seen. And in a few rare instances, law enforcement officials have allegedly been instructed not to investigate further. Are these just rumors? Or could there be a deeper, hidden truth about these encounters? One of the most unsettling aspects of modern black-eyed children encounters is the growing frequency and consistency. It is no longer a handful of isolated incidents. It is a recurring phenomenon, one that refuses to fade away. If these beings are simply lost spirits, why are they so persistent? If they are just hallucinations or urban legends, why do so many people, from different backgrounds, different countries, and different belief systems, describe the same experience in terrifying detail? The stories of black-eyed children are more than just urban legends. They are real experiences, shared by people from all walks of life. Those who never sought out the supernatural, those who had no reason to lie, and those who were left forever changed by their encounters. For decades, these eerie children have continued to appear, knocking on doors, standing silently outside homes, waiting for permission to enter. The terrifying consistency of their behavior, their ability to evoke overwhelming fear, and their insistence on following a strict invitation rule make them one of the most disturbing, unexplained phenomena of modern times.